So Nancy, the floor is yours.
Terrific. Thank you all so much. We are so excited to tell you about how wonderful our statewide STEM initiatives are here in Pennsylvania. And if you wouldn't mind sharing my first slide, that would be great. Thank you. So just a little bit of background to who's going to be presenting today. I'm Nancy Peter. I am the director of the McKinney Center for STEM Education at the Philadelphia, and also we are the backbone for the Philadelphia STEM ecosystem. And today I am joined by two of our illustrious partners and also two folks that have been working in this initiative from the start. Lexi Koncer-Grushinsky is from NEPA STEM Ecosystem and also Northeast IU 19. And also Judd Pittman, who up until December was the Special Assistant to the Secretary of Education for STEM at the Department of Education, and is now the director of K to, it should be K to 16, not K to exclamation mark 6 initiatives at Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. So we're going to tell you a little bit about what we call the Pennsylvania statewide STEM ecosystem, which is also the backbone for the Pennsylvania STEM Coalition. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And so, I made up the first bullet, but this is actually based on a lot of research I've done over the years for national goals and trends. And I didn't really make it up, but I didn't vet it by anybody in Pennsylvania. But it definitely holds through for Pennsylvania as well. So we see sort of 4 overarching goals for the state. And James had asked me a little bit about the history, the 10-year history of Pennsylvania, which I had to research in a week. We have 4 overarching goals, and I'm actually going to ask if other folks could mute themselves because there's a little bit of background noise right now. Maybe the host can. But one of them is sort of academic achievement, and we understand that academic achievement is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end. However, there's a lot of interest in helping students to succeed, to complete their coursework, to do well in high school, to complete high school, to matriculate into a 2- or 4-year college. And so we see a lot more initiatives, many more initiatives that are interested in simply promoting academic achievement. A huge one we all know is career access. And I've been in this field for over 40 years, and career access in STEM, which we used to call science, has always been really prevalent. But clearly now, with the degree to which one needs to know STEM to do a variety of STEM jobs, and also the interest in cultivating a STEM pipeline for vacancies, not only is a lot of interest in STEM access, but we have more and more industry partners whose goal in education is specifically to cultivate the next generation of STEM professionals. STEM literacy means that not every student who graduates proficient in STEM is going to be a scientist, and we get that. We want students K to 12, K to 16, K to 24 to be literate in STEM so that they can do things like understand the ingredients in the food that they eat, or recognize which drugs can and cannot be combined, or vote responsibly on a STEM related issue. So we don't ask all kids who learn how to read to become librarians, and we don't assume that every STEM literate student is going to become a scientist. And then lastly, responsible citizenry. And my background in environmental education pointed me to being an environmental steward, but STEM responsible citizenry just means having enough STEM knowledge and skill sets so that you can take care of your community. And whether it's a built community or whether it's a natural community, whether it's the people you live with or your neighborhood, the ability to give back. So that's my synopsis of the last 10 years of goals in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania now has 8 formal STEM ecosystems. Those are STEM ecosystems that were recognized, applied to, are sanctioned by TIES, the umbrella organization for the STEM learning ecosystems. And we have several informal STEM ecosystems. And we don't have a definition for what that is, but there's a lot of networks of STEM that have also come together under the umbrella of the Pennsylvania STEM Coalition. So in 2016, thanks to the work of my very, very dear friend, Judd Pittman, who was at PDE at the time, he started to hold meetings concurrently among the Pennsylvania STEM Coalition, and also meetings of all of the formal STEM ecosystems and informal ecosystems. And finally, at the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that we wanted to formalize ourselves. So we have been meeting, and Lexi will talk a little bit about this, pretty much every other week forever, virtually. And we have created the Pennsylvania Statewide STEM Ecosystem, which is the backbone for the Pennsylvania STEM Coalition. And sometimes even for us, it's hard to tell one from the other, but they are pretty much joined at the hip. So I'm going to go to the next slide and play you my favorite video of all time, which was created by Demetrius Roberts, who couldn't be here today. Demetrius is part of the Chester County Intermediate Unit, but he also replaced, I mean, Judd is irreplaceable, but he replaced Judd at the Department of Education and is now coordinating STEM initiatives. So take it away, Austin.
Hey, Judd, what's up, man? Thanks for meeting with me. Appreciate seeing you. And I just left that session and I saw your capstone for Lead STEM. That looks like a pretty cool program.
Yeah, the Lead STEM process and the journey has been excellent. I couldn't ask for anything more out of a program from the STEM ecosystem folks.
I'm thinking about doing it. I have some ideas of projects that we can do in our Commonwealth.
Oh, without a doubt, Dr. Roberts, you would be an awesome member of the Lead STEM Cohort 2. Each member of the cohort is a great colleague and somebody to bounce ideas off of, and they really spur one another to get through the capstone journey and get to the completion of your project.
You think I can at least get a recommendation from you?
You just let us know, and we're all in and supporting you through the Lead STEM program and really helping to make sure that it's a positive experience for you. You just let us know.
All right, I'm in, man. All right, I'll talk to you soon, and I'll see you around the rest of the conference.
All right, awesome. We'll see you around. Take care, Dr. Roberts.
Yeah, take care.
Hello?
Hey, what's up, Judd? It's me. How you doing?
Hey, D. I'm doing well. What can I do for you?
So I'm calling. I'm ready to start thinking about this capstone project. I'm thinking we need to do something where we bring together all these ecosystems, formal and informal ecosystems in the state, and we do some sort of convening, we do some sort of ongoing engagement.
We might want to pitch this idea to the ecosystem leads. We got that monthly meeting that has all of our partners, whether it's Sandy from Lancaster County or Nancy from Philadelphia, LaTrenda from Pittsburgh. We got the Carbon School Formals. That may be a good group to pitch the idea to.
All right, I like that. So how about this? I can put together a little bit more notes around like what that might look like. And if you can give me a shout out at one of the coalition meetings, maybe that'll be the time where we can get some momentum to see who we want to engage in building something like this.
No, that sounds like a good plan. And, if I don't get back to you right away, please just ping me, hit me on a text or something, but I'll take a look at the document. We got that upcoming meeting, just give me some gentle reminders and then we'll pitch it to the team.
All right. And I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Hello?
Hey, Judd. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Dr. Roberts. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm working on this lead STEM capstone project. I haven't made much progress. I know I sent you over some notes. I'm thinking we might need some help, man. What do you think?
Hey, I was reviewing the notes and the outline you have for the project. I think it's spot on. I'm wondering if we could think about, putting together some efforts with Nancy Peter. She's been reaching out recently regarding, bringing all of this work together under one tent. I think it might be time for us to connect with Nancy and see what expertise she could lend to this project.
I can use some hands, man. Let's call her up, send her an email, see if we can get her on a call.
All right, I'll reach out to her today and then we'll get her back.
All right.
All right, thanks, Dr. Roberts.
All right, talk to you later.
Hey, Dr. Roberts.
Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hey, I got us on a three-way call with Dr. Peter, myself, and you. I just wanted to circle back on this whole idea of PA United and what we can do to move all of this work forward around your capstone.
I've taken it as far as I can. My hands are getting busy here with all this coronavirus stuff going on. I need help. I don't know if I have time to devote in this. Nancy, you have time? How's everything going for you?
I was hoping you would ask. I am so excited to do this work. You guys have done all the really big thinking and the brainstorming and the visionary stuff, and I'm ready to give it some wheels. So we can start by convening a work group to really figure out what we're going to do short-term, long-term. We need to create a comprehensive distribution list of all of our stakeholders. I think it'd be great during COVID to have weekly meetings, which we advertise, and then we can have guest speakers, and then we can have follow-up notes. But wait, I'm not done. After we've been together for a week or two, we can write an Nsf Grant together, and then we can create retroactively the norms for working together. I have so many ideas on how to give this a little bit of traction.
Well, Dr. Peter, I love that you're able to hit the ground running and put legs on this project. The only ask that we would have here at the Department of Education is that we really rely on those stakeholders. So if you remember our monthly meetings, let's make sure that work group we put together includes all of our formal and informal STEM ecosystems. That's really the only ask we have here on our end.
And I'm already working on the first email, and I promise both of you that you'll get several emails from me within the next hour, peppered by a few texts and one or two phone calls. But I will definitely engage that first stakeholder group, and we can build from there.
I would expect nothing less. I knew, Dr. Roberts, as soon as we got Dr. Peter on the call, we would be able to move this project forward with an accelerator attitude.
Well, that's what I love to hear. Somebody that's ready to run and rip and take it forward. So all the meetings, the emails, the phone calls, Nancy, you lead the way and let me know what I can do to support you.
I definitely will. Thanks, guys. I'm on it.
Hey, thanks. Right. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
So one reason we like to show that video is because we think it's so doggone funny. And we also like the fact that Judd grew a beard over a period of time. But also the big point of that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lexi, is that our Pennsylvania statewide STEM ecosystem and the STEM coalition really needed lots of different types of brains. So Demetrius and Judd are very visionary. I'm very detail oriented. We had a few growing pains as far as all of us, those of us, the right brain, those of us are left brain, had to work together. But I think part of the success of our project has been really diverse skill sets and perspectives. And with that, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to let Lexi cover the next few things.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here representing PSSE and also meet the STEM ecosystem for all of you. So one of the things that once that initial convening of the leadership team happened between Demetrius, Judd, Nancy, myself, and a few others, we really started to hit the ground running and to start put together what we feel is the essential pieces in order to function, and then the essential pieces in order to maintain and grow, and to be able to continue this work into the future long term. So short term, we needed to have a group of folks that were go-getters and interested in getting things done and getting things decided. And we needed to develop that mission and vision for what we wanted for all of Pennsylvania when it came to STEM and our stakeholders. And so we started having weekly and bi-weekly meetings, both of the leadership team and of the STEM Coalition, that larger stakeholder group that represents multifaceted STEM stakeholders in Pennsylvania. And we created the ability to have a membership list that could be maintained in a database that is constantly growing, and we're constantly asking folks to attend to this work and be aware of the work that's going on. And so we do have a master list of participants that keeps growing, that has several thousand names strong at the moment. And with that, we have regular communication with them. And so those folks get a weekly email and bi-weekly meetings in which we have guest speakers come from different STEM stakeholder groups to share the work that they're doing across the state and regionally, and how the folks that are in the STEM Coalition can get involved. We also have done quite a lot of strategic planning with the leadership team to try to figure out what other things are necessary and kind of what we can put in place to be able to be successful both now and into the future. We were able to do a few things. One, we applied for an Nsf Grant, an Includes Grant. We applied for a statewide grant that is called PA Smart. If you're from Pennsylvania and you're familiar with PA Smart, we applied for a grant and we also were able to put together a couple of different things. So we surveyed our membership, and we were able to put together a memo for the Biden administration about the things that our stakeholder group wanted to happen legislatively in the areas of STEM. And so we were able to deliver that Biden memo to the administration so that they got information and input from stakeholders in Pennsylvania about the direction that we wanted STEM to go in the nation and in Pennsylvania. And we have done other things to be able to get the stakeholder feedback and get that information out to the larger audience. One of the ways that we're doing that is actually having this conversation here with James Brown and all of you. We are also participating in asset mapping to try to, oh yes, Jed, I agree, able to really dig down into the different pockets of innovation that are happening in Pennsylvania and be able to continue to illuminate the work that's being done in all the different nooks and crannies of Pennsylvania to the larger audience of the STEM Coalition. We also developed an ongoing communication plan. We have Google groups. We have, like I said, those weekly emails that go out to all of the STEM Coalition membership, and other things that are shared during those emails are not just the upcoming meetings and information about that, but also other opportunities that are statewide. We can advertise for those as well. And we continue to ask stakeholders to be involved in different ways, and we're working towards formalizing some of those ways into the future. And our hope is to have designated funding to be able to move forward for some of those larger expansion projects. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the successes that we're going to call out for this meeting about what it is that we do. I think sometimes when you're meeting constantly with a group of stakeholders and you're meeting even more vigorously with the leadership team, it's interesting to be able to look back on the last several years of work and realize, oh my gosh, we've really gotten pretty far down the road. Because when you're in it, it doesn't seem maybe that you're going as fast as you're going, but we really have done quite a lot in the few years that PSSE has been in existence. So So we do have right now initial and ongoing support from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. As Nancy said prior, it was initiated by Judd Pittman when he was in that leadership role in PDE, and it has continued through our connections with Dr. Demetrius Roberts, who is currently an administrator on assignment with the Department of Ed. So that ongoing support from PDE has continued. We also have a dedicated lead of our leadership team, which is Nancy Peter, and she takes care of the administration and coordination of all of the events that we do and all the meetings that we have. That leadership team has fluctuated very little in the amount of time that we've been in existence. If anything, we have expanded our leadership team to include additional folks instead of shrinking to get smaller. So those folks that consistently come every meeting, they're consistently interested in being involved, they're consistently working on things together. And we also have external and internal communication that is excellent. As Nancy said in the video, she is very, very good at communicating in lots of different ways and in lots of different spaces. And it was great for us as a group to be able to pull our membership to see, how would you like to be communicated to? Would you like a newsletter? Would you like an email once a week? How would you like to get your information? How would you like to digest your information? And then we are pulling our membership to see what it is that they're interested in seeing. And so we pulled our membership to work on the Biden memo to see what their values are for STEM education and what they want to see happening legislatively and policy-wise. But we also have gotten stakeholder input in terms of what guests we might want for our STEM coalition meetings, the direction that we might want to move while going forward. There is that open sense of communication, and that the folks that come to these coalition meetings, that input is valued and listened to. And we also have very strong commitment to DEI, outreach, bringing people to the table that may not be at the table. We look around constantly to see who needs to be here, who do we need to reach out to, who do we need to get information from, and connect them in the different ways in which they can be connected to our network. And of course, as Nancy can attest to, and so can Judd, that idea of humor, congeniality, and mutual respect is also important, because I think most of the work that we do has to be grounded in those three areas in order for us to be successful.
I'm going to ask, thank you, Lexi. I'm going to ask Judd to unmute himself and chime in a little bit. He's been putting lots of stuff in the chat about our success, but he was our fearless leader from the get-go. So Judd, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, introduce yourself, and sort of just a little bit of reflection on what Lexi and I have both presented.
Thanks, Nancy. I think y'all really, nailed it with regards to the timeline and the things that have really been working. Just to kind of round that out, I think one of the things that we were painstakingly intentional about was giving folks the grace to engage when it worked for them, and valuing them when they were there and had the moments to be in that space, whether that was during the pandemic or whether that was leading up to the work and the building of the coalition. The other elements were just the continued commitment to a common language. We wanted to really ensure that, regardless of how you individually define STEM in a community, that you found value and space to hook yourselves into the work that we were doing statewide around the ecosystems movement. And then in addition to the common language piece, really ensuring that we were speaking to sort of the language of the legislature and the language of government. So we made a very intentional focus on translating STEM education into workforce priorities and really centering our efforts around STEM to communicate the importance of those skill sets leading to family sustaining wages and leading to really solid job opportunities in the Commonwealth. And that's one thing that when we were looking at securing funding or getting buy-in from the agency, we were able to do that with bipartisan support. If you think about the makeup of the Commonwealth with regards to the governor's office in the state legislature during the time that we did this, we had a Democratic governor and a dominated legislature that was Republican dominated. And we were able to get and secure through that focus on common language, an annual $20 million investment in continuing to grow the work. And it was the first time that the legislature had significantly invested in public education in 30 years. And that was really through that common language piece. It wasn't that we were able to just get the commitment to education, but that real focus on workforce and how what we were doing parlayed into greater opportunities, whether you were Philadelphia, whether you were Northeast Pennsylvania, or whether you were Northwest Pennsylvania, regardless of geographies or zip codes, that commitment to economic development and workforce development was something that everybody could rally around. So if there is that space to really better understand not only your state's Department of Education goals, but also your state's workforce, economic, and labor and industry goals. And if you can be those entities that like bring that thread through that work, that's something that all of our ecosystems and the work that we laid the foundation for and will continue into the future has been able to do. It has really been that that community that binds, and it was something that I think really was a testament to all the work that folks like Nancy and Lexi and Dr. Roberts and Lindsay Sides and the hundreds of other individuals that have put sweat equity into the growing of the coalition. So I think, common language, being a good listener to what the tides are in your state, local government agencies, and then giving folks grace and space to engage. The one thing I do want to put a pin in that Lexi said that was critical is when you collect data from your constituencies, make sure that they see that in the outgrowth of what you provide. And that's one thing that folks have been really intentional about doing, is if we survey our constituents, that they see their responses in whatever the coalition or the Pennsylvania statewide ecosystem delivers for whether it's via webinar, whether it's via communication outreach, whatever that sort of mode of connection is.
Thank you, Jed. And we're gonna open it up to questions, and I'll let James figure out how to do that. But before we do that, I just want to add the last 3 points is what have been our speed bumps along the way? What have been our challenges? What have we either overcome or are attempting to overcome? I think the first one is that Judd and then the leaders of the 8 STEM ecosystems are all leaders. So we were convening 9 leaders of leaders. And so trying to figure out our work styles, trying to work together. We alluded to the fact within a couple of months of being together, we wrote an Nsf Grant, and we almost got all divorced over that. It was excruciating, and trying to figure out, really how we work together. And then we created a series of norms, but over the last couple of years, I can't think of a more congenial, more harmonious group to work with. We mentioned that the leadership team really steps up and everybody sort of has a function, but figuring out the interpersonal dynamics was one of our first challenges. The other one is that we all have full-time jobs. And so creating a coalition that we had to spend a lot of time on was also really challenging. How do we carve out that time? And I think that's an ongoing challenge. And then I think the elephant in the living room is, well, how do we fund this extra work? So we wrote this really, really, really fabulous Nsf grant. We didn't get funded, but we were able to use that. We applied for an Includes grant. It includes planning grant. I think we got a little bit of background noise too. And so we did not get that grant, but we used a lot of that fodder for our PA Smart grant. And we're hoping to hear about that next week. But we applied for some other small grants, and we did get a couple of those small grants, and we're still continuing to look for designated funding. Judd alluded to this, that in the RFPs and in the policy work that was emanating and is still emanating from the Department of Education, there's language in there now about ecosystems. And so some of us get money through something called the Statewide System of Support in Pennsylvania that, among other things, supports our ecosystems. So finding funding is still a struggle, but I think we're making headway. And I'm going to pause there. I'm going to mute myself, James. And I don't know if you want to read some of the questions or how you want to sort of manage the Q&A.
Well, so let's ask everybody here to use the raise hand function if you have a question. And there are a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm just gonna, I'll start with the last question from actually Kim. Would you like to ask your question, Kim Case?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm in the COVID process right now, but I'm surviving. But nice to see everybody and hear from all of you guys. My question is similar in New Jersey. We have a statewide network. We have 7 STEM ecosystems right now. And I'm wondering exactly, what are you guys looking to use the funding for? Are you going to give ecosystems funding for programming? Are you looking for operations for the statewide network? Are you going to do like a grant process? I'm curious for my, for our network as well.
Nancy, you're muted.
I can answer that, and if Lexi or Judd want to chime in, but having spent a lot of time on the most recent grant, we're definitely looking to support the infrastructure so that we're not all working above and beyond our day jobs. So we're hoping to be able to hire either part-time or full-time staff to manage the communication. We're looking specifically for to create a website. We'd like to have a very targeted marketing and outreach effort, and as Lexi said, particularly to engage those members that are not represented right now. We want to be able to do a little bit more policy work. So have efforts that are specific to influencing both statewide and federal policy. And we, in one of our recent grants, we want to put on a conference every year, a statewide conference. We haven't had a statewide STEM conference in many, many years. So that's what part of our funding is for. So some of it is products, some of it is service, and some of it is infrastructure. I hope that answers your question.
So had a kind of a similar question from Adrian Linnell about what kind of NSF grant did you apply for? Talk about that a little bit.
Yep, we applied for an NSF includes planning grant. So it was $100,000 to plan. And that was back in the fall of 2020. We did not get that grant, but true to NSF, we got a lot of really useful feedback. And we were able to use that grant application as fodder for additional smaller grants and also our PA Smart grant.
So one question I wanted to ask is, it seems to me like a big part of the success for this sort of parallels the PA Smart initiative, right? And I'm wondering, like, how would you describe is there a chicken and an egg relationship in that interaction? And the sort of the follow-up to that is, so where do you go from here, right? Because that happened under Governor Wolf. Governor Wolf is going to have a successor in the fall. Talk about sort of how you bridge that gap and sort of the interaction between you, the governor's office. Judd was in the governor's office, and the way in which did PA Smart help bring the state together, or was it the other way around?
I'm going to jump in and then I'm going to turn over to Judd. I'm going to answer the last part of your question, is that we were very, very deliberate to not have the locus of control be in state government. The Pennsylvania statewide STEM ecosystem is run by the 8 ecosystems, anticipating that a change in state government might shift things around. And PSSE will continue independent of what happens in state government. So I think that was very purposeful, and in hindsight is very strategic. We did not want to be anchored in state government. But I'm going to ask Judd to just jump in and talk about the interface between PA Smart and PSSE.
So the PA Smart was really birthed out of like the first year of Governor Wolf. We went on what was called the Middle Class Task Force, and we wanted to better understand what needed to happen to move vulnerable scholars square into the center of the middle class economy. And that sparked the opportunity to really think about sort of the intersection of collective impact. So the Department of Labor and Industry was going at a model called Next Generation Sector Partnerships, which is a collective impact model. And we started to unearth this idea of STEM ecosystems. Nancy and her team had applied for national recognition, and so did the folks out in Pittsburgh. And what we ended up doing was bringing those individuals to the table when we were designing PA Smart as a policy solution, and a way to spark innovation in the Commonwealth. So they were really they became part of that constituency that bubbled up just as much as folks from Microsoft or any of the top industries in the Commonwealth, or the way that Code.org and others wanted to lean into that space. Everybody had a seat at the table and voice, and so they really influenced how we got to design PA Smart. The other piece of that was we wanted to make sure that every dollar that went out the door connected and de-siloed work. So part of Governor Wolf's focus was a government that works. And we wanted to demonstrate that in the policy solutions that we generated. So every funding opportunity had to demonstrate an ecosystem approach through letters of support and the way that they designed their initiatives. And then the one thing that we tried to do to insulate the funding from the whims of administration change was that instead of putting it in the general funding line of the department, we put it in the career and technical education funding line of the department. So, and that was strategic in a space of, it's really hard for a lawmaker to say that they're going to take away dollars from spaces that are building that middle skilled economy that we want so desperately in the Commonwealth. So, the headline of that is, lawmakers remove $20 million from career and technical education funding. That isn't a headline that any lawmaker wants to take back to their community, especially when you're trying to drive and there's such a thirst for that particular skill set in any state, frankly. And then I think the last part of that, like, what does that look like post-Wolf administration is, over the last 8 years, the one thing that has been the common tie that everybody could talk about was PA Smart. Republican or Democrat, they wanted to know, when are the grants going out? When can we talk to our constituencies about that? So it is something that really has been a bridge for conversation. Now, I'm not going to lie to you that it hasn't been tossed around as a political football every budget cycle, but it's also something that no one wants to take away. And there may be an opportunity to kind of redesign that a little bit in the sense of, like, is it all going to go out through $20 million of grants? The pandemic told us that, there needed to be governor's office approval to adjust some of those funds for things that needed to happen. But ultimately, in the budget code, it's supposed to go out as innovation grants across 3 industries. And it was education, labor and industry, and economic development. And so that was all very intentional in how that we designed that and put that into the state budget. And then Nancy said it very well. It was intentional that PSSE was formed outside of state government so that it could be one of those influential champions or knowledge groups that the department could lean on, and that it wouldn't be tied to any particular political affiliation, but was really about championing, STEM education and workforce development work across the Commonwealth.
I appreciate that, and the other thing I think is interesting, and part of the reason why I thought Pennsylvania was a good focus for this session, was it also sort of shows the union of not just what I'd call the K-12 formal education community, but you also had, you guys work very closely with the Pennsylvania After School Youth Development Network, Poseidon as it's called in Pennsylvania. You had numerous business groups that were involved in these efforts at different points. Can you talk about, in particular, can you just talk a little bit about the after school piece and how that fit together with the rest of this? Because that's another convergence we see happening in other places.
I think just the nature of the ecosystem, starting with our individual ecosystems, was to have diverse stakeholders. So in Philadelphia, we have a really good mix of, school district, informal educators, community groups, businesses and industries, government agencies, higher ed, and philanthropists. I think I said everything. And that was really replicated on a statewide level. That said, one of our goals and what we hope to do with additional funding is to really do a deep dive into our data to see which constituencies are not represented. So it could be by the nature of their entity, their organization, it could be geographically, could be rural versus, urban, et cetera. But from the get-go, again, under Judd's leadership, but also Poseidon has always been a part of our leadership team, very, very purposely reaching out to out-of-school time and after school. That said, when, for instance, we do our bi-monthly coalition webinars, we have to make sure that they're of interest to multiple audiences. So not every single one is going to be equally interesting to higher ed and industry, but we recognize that our audience is really diverse. And so to retain that diverse audience, we have to make sure that we're addressing their interests and their needs. So the short answer is that engaging informal educators has not really been an issue. I will say one logistical choice we made is that when we have our bi-monthly, our twice monthly webinars, some of them are from 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning, and some are from 4 to 5 in the afternoon, recognizing that after school staff won't be able to make it in the afternoon, and school district teachers and staff probably won't come in the morning. So there's this recruitment and retention, and there's also sort of this customizing for different audiences.
Heather, do you have a question? Heather from STEMX?
I do. Thank you so much. This has been really informative to see how you guys have pulled together a multidisciplinary team and went from regional to statewide. So congrats on that. I know that you've done a number of things to obtain some funding for operations. Who's going to be the lead organization or the backbone organization to hold that funding when it eventually comes through?
Great question. And so, for instance, when we applied for the PA Smart Grant, an intermediate unit or institution of higher education has to apply. So we actually applied through Lexi's organization, Northeast Intermediate Unit. And so they will be the fiscal agent. But part of our plan for funding, and I keep thinking of why we're asking for funding, more things, is to do some significant strategic planning, which includes identifying a fiscal agent. So we've actually been working with an external organization who's interested in being our fiscal agent. We need to have some fiscal first. We need to get a little bit of funding. But part of our planning process will definitely to identify when, how, if we need a fiscal agent. So that's a great question. And I wanted to add one more thing. I could add 7 more things, but we were contracted last year with from TIES, the Teaching Institute for STEM Excellence, who does all the ecosystem work. And they asked us to create an Ecospheres toolkit. So Ecospheres is the word that we've been using for clusters of ecosystems. So PSSE is one of those. And so we actually published a toolkit, which is on the TIES website, on how to create sort of step-by-step something like we have in Pennsylvania. And I know that James has that link, and hopefully we can share that afterwards. But we've also been very interested in disseminating the work that we've done. We've done a number of actually workshops on how to do this kind of work. And so we're really hoping to scale it. So thank you for your question, Heather.
So let me ask another question of the states. What was the evolution to go from a series of regional networks to something that was unified? Like, what were some of the barriers that got broken down in doing that? And I'll share this as somebody who went to Penn State and knows the sort of the Pennsylvania geography, right? You had Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and then the T, right? Did the regional differences just assuage over time? Was it having PA Smart as a statewide funding source? Like, was there something to that, or did that just evolve over time? Because we've had the same issue in other states where we've gone in and worked with one state partner, and it's just a persistent challenge in a lot of different places where you have a single large city or a collection of large cities, and then you have other communities that don't always work well together. Was there anything you learned from that process, or how did, I mean, what can you say about that?
I'm going to jump in, and then I talk a lot, so please, Judd or Lexi, if you want to add. But I think our experience with individual ecosystems was transferable to our experience with the statewide ecosystem. So in Philadelphia, like in many big cities, we had a whole bunch of networks that were all bumping into each other. We had to make a case for why joining forces in a single network would benefit everybody. And people kind of had to let go of their egos. And so we went from having maybe 4 or 5 STEM networks in Philadelphia to having the Philadelphia STEM ecosystem serving everyone. And I think something really similar happened in Pennsylvania. Early on, there were at least 2 other networks that were doing similar work, and they all deliberately chose to pause so that we could coalesce under PSSE. And I really haven't found, I'm going to turn that over to Lexi or Judd, but we really haven't encountered a lot of challenges regarding making a space for folks from all over the state. And again, part of that is very deliberate, making sure that we address the needs of the audience. Lexi, I know that I talk a lot. I said that for the 3rd time, but Lexi, do you want to jump in and talk about that at all from your perspective?
Absolutely. From Northeastern Pennsylvania, I know from my experience regionally and from my experience across the state that Pennsylvania is one big small town. Some of you may live in states that are like that. So even though we are mighty and large, we tend to do the 6 degrees of separation every time we get together from across the state to see who we're related to. So there's that going on as well, which I think might be an undercurrent of why this works. But also, I think the global pandemic was one of the best things to happen to us, and I'll tell you why. Is that there was not necessarily this expectation that we would have to convene large groups of stakeholders in person, because we didn't have the ability to do that because of safety reasons and because of a lot of other really good reasons. And so that kind of forced us all as networks to communicate in other ways. And once you start communicating via Zoom and via the internet, a whole world of opportunity starts to open up to you when it comes to networks. You can, reach out more often on social media. You can build that part of your platform out. You can create that STEM coalition with thousands of stakeholders in it from across the state, where they're not bound by geography. They're connected by the things that connect all of us across the state, which is an enlightened self-interest and similar goals. And so getting the word out was the biggest challenge. But once that word got out throughout all the different regional networks that, hey, we're doing this thing, you should come, you should do it. It worked very, very well, because we knew that, we didn't necessarily have that expectation of having a huge in-person meeting where we would have to literally travel to a space in order to communicate with one another. That eliminated a barrier that in some cases we didn't even realize that we had. And so that's the piece that I'll add to that.
So any last questions from the audience? I think this has been a really interesting discussion. We look forward to seeing how this goes over the next couple of years through this transition to a new governor. So let me just leave it there and see if anybody else has any last questions or comments.
James, I would just say, like, the one thing is, as agency or policymakers, making sure that the T you referred to, that you show up and you go there and you build the relationships. And if there was one thing that we heard continually, was that around the STEM work, that we were showing up and being there and telling the story of those communities. And it just built a level of relationship and trust that we weren't previously seeing, and those communities weren't hearing from us as state government. So I think if the moral of that story is, take the time, regardless of season or distance, to visit and listen and learn.
Excellent last word there, Judd.
I want to add one thing too to your question, James, and also ones that have come up in the chat. I can't say enough about constant communication and reliability. So many of us have joined networks that have started and stopped and then sputtered to a slow death. And I think we've really developed a reputation, for being communicative, reliable, timely. People know that if they pause their networks to join ours, or if they come to our coalition meetings, you know, they're going to get minutes, they're going to get a recording, they're going to know when the next meeting is. We're going to respond to their emails. And I can't, as much as I, you know, again, I'm the logistics person. You've got these really, really big thinkers. And then I also really believe so strongly in strong leadership, really attracts and retains members.
Excellent feedback. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciated all the different insights and participation in this, and look for another one soon. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.